They say language is power. It connects people, shapes identity, and silently reveals where you belong. But sometimes a language can travel far beyond where it started. It can cross oceans, touch new cultures, and quietly settle in a place no one ever imagined. And right now, on the other side of the world from the Philippines, something remarkable is happening. A language born on Southeast Asian islands is slowly, quietly becoming part of everyday life in the Middle East. Could it be true? Could Tagalog really be turning into Israel's second language? To understand how this happened, we need to walk back in time. This story doesn't begin with politics or official agreements, it begins with people. Two nations separated by distance, culture, faith, and history, yet brought together by everyday human connection. Decades ago, Filipinos first traveled to Israel. They didn't come as tourists or backpackers. They came as workers, as nurses, as caregivers, ordinary people with extraordinary resilience. Many of them were women, leaving their families behind so they could support them. They arrived in a land unlike their own, hoping for better opportunities. But what no one predicted was that their presence, their culture, and especially their language, would leave a mark far beyond the jobs they came to perform. At first, the Filipino language, mostly Tagalog, lived in small spaces, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in private moments. Filipino caregivers spoke Tagalog when they called home. They whispered it to themselves when they missed their families. They spoke it among other workers during their one day off each week. It was the language of comfort, of home, of identity. But inside the homes where they worked, something unexpected began to unfold. Elderly Israelis, people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, began listening to the gentle Tagalog spoken around them every day. The caregivers would say, "Kumain ka na?" asking if they had eaten. They would greet their employers with "Magandang umaga," wishing them a good morning. They would sing Filipino lullabies. They would pray in Tagalog, and over time those words began to stick. An old man might suddenly repeat, "Kumain ka na?" with a soft smile. A grandmother might greet her caregiver with "Magandang umaga," proud to say the words correctly. What started as simple phrases slowly became a cultural bridge. For many Israelis, Tagalog became the language of kindness, patience, warmth, and trust. It became the language of someone who cared for them when they felt weak, someone who listened to their stories, someone who stayed by their side day and night. And this is where something extraordinary began. The sound of Filipino was no longer foreign. It became familiar, comforting, a part of the rhythm of daily life. Today, if you walk through the streets of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, or Haifa, you will hear Tagalog not only from Filipinos, but also from Israelis who picked it up naturally through daily interactions, words absorbed through years of closeness and shared routines. Children especially. Children raised by Filipino nannies often grow up speaking Tagalog better than some Filipinos raised abroad. Imagine a child whose first lullabies were Filipino, whose bedtime stories were told in Tagalog, whose nanny comforted them with Filipino words whenever they scraped their knee or cried. These children grow up not just bilingual but bicultural. They carry Filipino values, respect for elders, gentleness, patience deep within them. Some Israeli parents even say their children pronounce Tagalog words more clearly than Hebrew. When they're small, picture a little boy in Jerusalem running around the house calling his nanny ate, or a young girl calling her caregiver tita, words of respect that naturally become part of their vocabulary. These children are living proof that Filipino is no longer just the language of migrants. It has woven itself into Israeli homes, hearts, and memories. But how did this happen on such a large scale? To understand that, we must look at the numbers. Today, Israel is home to over 30,000 documented Filipino workers, mostly women. Many believe the real number is far higher. Most of them work in healthcare and caregiving, a role that has become vital as Israel's population ages. While other migrant groups might be employed in agriculture or construction, Filipinos are placed inside family homes, day after day, year after year. They share meals, they attend birthday parties, they go with families to medical appointments, they sing songs at night, they become part of the family structure. This closeness makes language exchange unavoidable. Over time, Tagalog words fill the home like background music. Before long, everyone in the house knows them. Even the family pets respond to Tagalog commands. Accents soften, phrases become inside jokes, and slowly, a new linguistic culture is born inside Israeli households. Outside the home, Filipino communities thrive too. Every Sunday, their only day off, Public parks and open squares transform into mini versions of Manila. Tagalog fills the air, music plays loudly. People gather to talk, laugh, and share food. And Israelis walking by hear these words again and again. Some begin to understand them without ever trying to learn. Tagalog becomes part of the public soundscape, and it doesn't stop there. In some Israeli schools, teachers report children speaking Tagalog among themselves, especially those raised by Filipino caregivers. Hebrew and Filipino blend together as naturally as childhood friendships. No one predicted this, but it's happening. Children who don't have Filipino parents grow up speaking a Filipino language because it was the first voice of love they heard. Why does this matter? Why is this more than just workers teaching phrases to employers? Because language carries culture. When Israelis speak Tagalog, even just a few words, they're not just repeating sounds. They're embracing Filipino values. The deep respect for elders, the warmth in daily interactions, the softness in tone, the value of family above all else. These values resonate strongly in Israeli society too, especially in households caring for elderly relatives. Filipino becomes more than just vocabulary. It becomes a cultural bridge between two nations, a bridge built through kindness, patience, and shared humanity. Let's step into the life of a Filipino caregiver in Israel. She wakes up early. She helps her employer get out of bed. She prepares meals, organizes medications, and speaks with patience and gentleness. The elderly person may not understand every word, but they understand the emotion. They hear the sincerity. Over time, they ask questions. What does that word mean? How do I say thank you in Tagalog? And soon, they start speaking it themselves. There are stories of elderly Israelis who spent years with Filipino caregivers and now speak Tagalog almost fluently. There are households where the entire family, including children and grandparents, switches comfortably between Hebrew and Filipino. Israeli newspapers have written about this, calling Filipino caregivers the second family of the nation. And as the second family, they also bring a second language. One of the most fascinating parts of this phenomenon is how deeply it affects Israeli children. A nanny sings Bahay Kubo every night. A little girl learns to dance tinikling in the living room. A boy learns to say kuya when calling his older brother figure. These children will grow up remembering Filipino culture as part of their childhood foundation. In a sense, the Philippines is helping raise part of Israel's next generation, not just with care, but with language, values, music, and memories. Some say this influence is temporary. They believe the language will fade when the workers return home. But anyone who has spoken two languages as a child knows the truth. The language stays. Even if it is not used daily, it becomes a part of the person's identity. A Filipino song they heard as a baby, the smell of adobo cooking, a Tagalog phrase whispered to calm them down. These memories last a lifetime. Tagalog also thrives in Israel's public spaces. On Sundays, when workers gather, Israelis hear Tagalog words so often that they become familiar. Food vendors shout Filipino dish names. People greet each other loudly in Tagalog, and the language slowly becomes part of the rhythm of Israeli city life. This raises a powerful question. Could Tagalog eventually become Israel's unofficial second language? It sounds dramatic, but consider this. A language does not need legal status to live. It only needs people to speak it. And in Israel, Tagalog is spoken inside thousands of homes every single day. In some neighborhoods, more than Russian, more than Amharic, even more than Arabic. Filipino is shaping the modern soundscape of Israel more than people realize. But beyond statistics and numbers, there is something deeper. For many Israelis, Tagalog is the language of comfort, the language of someone who cared for them, fed them, listened to them, and treated them with dignity. When they hear kain na tayo, meaning let's eat, it is not just an invitation. It is a memory, a moment of affection, a reminder of someone who made them feel safe. For the Philippines, this phenomenon carries another meaning. Filipinos in Israel are not just workers. They are ambassadors of culture. They bring their stories, their songs, their values, and their language into another nation's heart. And in return, Israel welcomes those gifts. This is diplomacy not written on paper, but lived in everyday life. It is also a story of resilience. Many Filipino workers face long hours, homesickness, and financial struggles. Yet they continue to give their all with a full heart. They speak their language naturally without fear of judgment. And Israel has responded with openness, embracing their words, their songs, their culture. For many Filipinos, working in Israel carries spiritual meaning. Israel is the Holy Land. They grew up hearing biblical stories about this place. Many see their work not just as a job, but as a calling, a mission. They believe that serving others, especially the elderly, is a form of serving God. This deep sense of purpose makes their influence even stronger, because their care comes from a place of devotion and faith. Looking ahead, the trend shows no signs of slowing down. Israel continues to rely heavily on Filipino workers. More homes will naturally absorb Filipino language. More children will grow up bilingual. More elderly people will speak Tagalog in their final years. More families will travel to the Philippines to understand the homeland of the people who cared for them. So is Filipino really becoming Israel's second language? Maybe not officially on government documents, but in the hearts and homes of tens of thousands it already is. It is the language of lullabies, prayers, jokes, meals, and love. It is the language of someone who stayed by your side, someone who held your hand, someone who became family. And in the end, that is what truly gives a language power. Not how widely it is spoken, but how deeply it touches people's lives. This story isn't about governments or statistics, it's about people. About a grandmother in Tel Aviv who speaks Tagalog with a warm smile. About a child in Jerusalem whose first words were Filipino. About an Israeli family that calls their caregiver family because she raised their children as if they were her own. It is about the Filipino language finding a home in the most unexpected place, proving that language knows no borders. Filipino is no longer just the voice of the Philippines. In Israel, it has become the voice of care, comfort, and family. And that, more than anything else, is why many believe Tagalog deserves to be called Israel's second language.